Greetings, YouTube friends. Welcome to another episode of Seriously Planning, a weekly BookTube show. Today I'm talking about a book called Sofia Khan is Not Obliged by Ayisha Malik. And I have lots and lots to say about this book, so I'm just going to get right into the review. But before I get started, before I talk about my excitement and enthusiasm about this book for me is very special because it's how I got introduced into the booking community in the first place. So a few months ago, I was in a bookstore here in Johannesburg, an area called Sandton to be specific, and I saw this book on the shelf and I was instantly captivated by the cover. Check out how beautiful it is. I'll talk a little bit about the cover in a moment, but just gorgeous. And I was intrigued by the description of the book, by the title. I had never heard of this book before. And then I went home and I looked online to try and find reviews. So when I looked for reviews online, I found videos with the author, but more importantly, videos of booktubers and booktubers who I'd never heard of this community before. And I found people who were talking about this book, super enthused about this book. It's where I found, I think, still one of my favorite booktubers of all time, Lena from Just Kiss My Frog. And I found other people talking about this book as well. And that was a few months ago. So I think there are more people who have read that book since then, this book since then. But what struck me at that time, this book is about a Muslim character. It's about a girl named Sofia Khan. And that's rare for contemporary fiction, for women's fiction, if you want to call it that. And I was wondering if I would like the book as a Muslim female. So a lot of the people who are doing reviews were saying, I've never met a Muslim in real life. I've never read about a Muslim while reading a book. I haven't encountered Muslim characters. And I love this book for that reason and because it was so funny. I have read books with Muslim characters that I've absolutely hated because they've been just boring characters and boring books. And I didn't know, as a Muslim who shares some of the similar experiences with the main character, whether I would like the book as well. And so I was trying online to find out whether I would like the book, and I couldn't really find anyone talking about the book from a Muslim perspective, from a Muslim female wearing a headscarf perspective. And eventually I just bought the book and realized I wanted to start a channel of my own. So that's how this channel started in the first place, from wanting to create a space of more diversity in the BookTube community and wanting to talk about this book from a Muslim perspective. I think since I've discovered the book, there are people on Twitter and online who have read the book who are also Muslim female and have raved about it. But at that time, there wasn't really anyone out there. So that's my story. On to the review. So this book, first I want to talk about the cover because it is just gorgeous. It's right here. Hopefully you can see it clearly. And I love this cover because it's so bright. It's teal, it's red. There are no typical book tropes on this cover. I think normally when you see a book that has Muslim females in the title or in the subject matter, you see black headscarves, you see just eyes on the cover, you see some ridiculous pun involving the word veil. And none of that is here. It's just Sofia Khan is not obliged. She's wearing high heels. She's in a red scarf. She looks really chic and fun on the cover. There's a guy on the cover in a scarf. They're looking at each other. There's pretty designs. It's really not the kind of cover that you tend to see when it's a book about Muslim women, and so I really appreciate that. So kudos to the publishers, kudos to the authors. You really did a very good job with the cover. The book itself is about a girl named, or a woman I guess, named Sofia Khan. She's 30 years old and she lives in London with her parents. Her sister is about to get married in a few months' time, and she works in the publishing industry. She's a publicist at a publishing house, and she talks about how the publishing industry is very, very, very white, and because of that, she's a bit of a curiosity in the office. She loves her coworkers, she loves her boss, but she finds she's always kind of explaining what it means to be Muslim in the office, and with that comes a lot of comedy. And when the book starts, she's just broken up. There's no spoilers, this is like the first 20 pages of the book. She's just broken up with her, I guess you could say boyfriend, but she talks in the beginning of the book about it. What do you really call a person that you like? It's not just a friend, it's not quite a boyfriend. A lot of Muslims don't tend to date, and so that there's no word to describe the relationship between friend and boyfriend, she says. But whatever that word is, she's in some kind of relationship with someone who she wants to marry, and they break up because he wants her to live with the in-laws. She doesn't, and they part ways. And she's talking about this in the office and about how Muslim dating is so confusing. And her boss says, you should write a book about Muslim dating. And from there, she goes from publicist to publicist and writer and starts joining marriage sites like shadi.com, starts interviewing her friends, starts looking at her sister's relationship more closely. And it's really about just how she explores her own life and the topic of love more generally. And what I found about this book, I think the dominant characteristic of this book, it is just really, really, really funny. I read this book over a couple of days, and I was reading it at work. I was reading it on the weekend, curled up. And as I was reading, all you could really hear was me just laughing out loud over and over and over again. And what I think is really special about this book is that it captures a lot of things that are very familiar to lots of Muslims, especially if you're in a Western context, where you're trying to find a prayer room at work and you're trying to explain to people at work what it is you need, how often you need your prayer space, what you're doing all the time as you're running to the prayer room. You're trying to explain Muslim relationships, and you're trying to explain that no, you really don't miss a prayer. All these things that are part and parcel of being a Muslim female, or just a Muslim generally in the West, she captures really, really, really well. There's also times when she's feeling unsure about what she's doing romantically with her life, and she decides to take out the istikhara prayer, which is a prayer of guidance, and kind of turns her problems to God and says, please help me figure out the things that I'm really confused about. So as again, I've read other books with Muslim characters, but when you haven't seen a lot of books that have Muslim protagonists, especially not ones that are funny and smart and intelligent and resemble a lot of people that you know, it's really validating and wonderful to see yourself reflected in literature, and I really enjoyed that part about the book. I also appreciate the fact that she was unapologetically Muslim. I've read other books where the character is like, yeah, I'm culturally Muslim, but it's not really that important to me. My faith isn't that important to me. But she finds peace and comfort in the rituals of faith, in prayer, in trying to uphold the headscarf despite weird encounters with people calling her terrorists and things like that. And I really like that the character had that. At the same time, she's not a perfect Muslim. She smokes, she swears, and I think that's one thing that I'm not exactly sure how I feel about, because it was a little bit hard to get used to her swearing all the time throughout this book. But I did appreciate that she wasn't like a perfect character. I think on Twitter I saw someone saying, using the hashtag hijab, it's a hijab, not a halo, and I think this book conveys that idea really well. It's also a book that doesn't show one type of Muslim relationship. So she has a friend who is contemplating entering a polygamous relationship, which is very rare but does exist, and she's trying to be supportive to her friend and negotiate her own feelings about that. She has friends who are trying to negotiate entering a mixed race relationship and how to explain that to their parents, especially a South Asian family. And you see that between all these different women, there isn't one specific example of a Muslim relationship. And that was great as well. So overall, the wonderful things about this book were the humor. It's just, again, a really, really funny book. And having someone put language to things that I think a lot of people who come from a Muslim background identify with, and just seeing wonderful Muslim characters. And at the same time, there are a couple of things that I didn't really like about this book, and I wanted to discuss those as well. So the first thing is the writing. There were a few times I found typos or spelling mistakes and things like that in the book, but those are surface things. What I missed in this book was having description and like really rich writing. I think it's because I just read Cartography, which was an amazing book by Camila Shamsi. But this book, because it's written in a diary style, and so it's her saying 7:05, this is what I did, 7:10, this is what I did, 8:30, this is what I did, 8:30 p.m., this is what I did. And in between, you're missing a lot of what happens to her. And you're also missing just descriptions of what does her community look like, what does the mosque look like, what does her world look like. It's not very description heavy or description light. There just is no description in this book. And the writing style felt like it needed maybe a mix between the diary and other forms of her just being out and about in the city. So that was one thing. And I also felt like it could be edited a little bit more. There were times where I just felt tired about the story and I just wanted it to move along, or I wanted the characters to make a decision, and I felt myself not caring with the characters at particular times. But my main critique of this book is that there are no positive South Asian male characters in this book, and there are no positive South Asian relationships in this book. And this book does a great job in showing that Muslim women are not oppressive, but I really wanted a male character that shows that South Asian males are not necessarily creeps or idiots or horrible people you need to avoid by all costs. And I kept thinking at some point she's going to meet someone, or there's going to be some major turnaround, and I'm going to say, aha, there were all these creeps, but she ended up with someone, or I'm not going to say spoilers of who she ends up with, but I kept waiting for there to be a moment of redemption on the male front. And I think I felt a little bit cheated of not getting that from any quarter. Like, her parents don't have a happy marriage. Her sister has a spouse who never sticks up for her, or like sticks up for her in very light ways. And she talks to her brother-in-law about as useful as a used tea bag. The guys in her life just give such mixed signals and are just very weak, almost spineless characters. And I think that's selling South Asian males a little short. And I really wanted there to be a mix of characters, of there being some creepy ones and maybe some really great ones, and that you can come away saying, oh, Muslims and South Asians are a very mixed group of people, and I shouldn't judge. And really, and this book doesn't go into long exposition. One thing I really appreciate about this book is it doesn't go into long expositions of Islam, of these are the 5 pillars of Islam, this is what Muslims believe, etc., etc. You get some things that are part of Muslim life, where she talks about Ramadan, and she talks about fasting, and she talks about prayer, and she talks about other things, but it's not really a let me explain to you the 5 pillars of Islam, which is perfectly reasonable. It's a work of commercial fiction, and I think for that reason it's appealing to a lot of readers who aren't Muslim, and you don't have to be Muslim to find your way into this book. But at the same time, if you have stereotypes about Muslims, and if you have stereotypes about Muslim men, in some ways this book kind of confirms that as well. And I also, while I appreciated that Sofia was not a perfect character, one of the things that I find really difficult about contemporary fiction and about women's fiction in general is that sometimes the language is really off-putting, and the language is, I don't like being around swearing, and sometimes I find that books just have a lot of swearing, particularly when they're like modern romances and things like that. And so when I read this, I thought, aha, a book that will be totally not like that. And in some ways it isn't. It's a very clean book because she's describing a Muslim relationship, which isn't generally physical before marriage. But she does swear a ton, and there's lots of moments that are really scandalous about the book. And I wasn't sure how to navigate my way through that. That is Sofia Khan is Not Obliged. Again, this is the cover. I highly recommend reading it. I highly recommend supporting it. It's not a perfect book. I don't know how many stars I would give it, but it's worth supporting Muslim authors, and this is one that will make you laugh. There are lots of books that I've read by Muslim authors that are just terrible. This is not like that. This is, I think, is a very funny book, but it's not perfect. And I look forward to there being lots of different books out on the market. We're published by lots of different publishers with lots of different stories, so that even though this book is not my story, it doesn't describe my culture because she's from a very Pakistani culture, hopefully in like 5, 10, 15 years, we'll see a lot more variety. This is a great start though. Till next time, take care.